Now on BBC World News, the biggest African and international news stories. Focus on Africa.
Hello, I'm Sophie Ikenye. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. Hailed as a hero for saving lives during the Rwandan genocide, Paul Rusesabagina is now facing a 25-year sentence in prison for terror-related crimes. Concerns are raised over the UK's COVID travel policy after it announces that some vaccinated travellers from Africa will still have to face the same quarantine rules as the unvaccinated. Also in the programme, a call to action over climate change. As world leaders meet in New York ahead of tomorrow's UN General Assembly, we'll explore some of the most pressing questions they face over the climate crisis.
Will the developed world finally materialize the $100 billion of annual support to developing countries?
And in sport, an African record for one Kenyan sprint sensation in the Kip Keino Classic in Nairobi over the weekend. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. A court in Rwanda has found the former hotel manager who's credited with saving hundreds of people during the 1994 genocide guilty of terror-related crimes. Paul Rusesabagina, whose actions inspired the Hollywood movie Hotel Rwanda, was accused and charged with terrorism. He has been sentenced to 25 years in prison. He'd of late become a vocal critic of the Rwandan President Paul Kagame. Clarice Fortuné has more for us.
He is absent, and yet his shadow looms larger than ever in the Kigali court. Paul Rusesabagina, whose life inspired the film Hotel Rwanda, has been found guilty of terrorism. He and his co-accused Calix Sabimana were tried for their support to the National Liberation Forces, a rebel group accused of deadly attacks between 2018 and 2019.
Calix Sabimana, Elias Sankara, and Paul Rusesabagina, who are members of the MRCD, founded the FLN, considered to be the military wing of MRCD. The court finds that they should be found guilty for being part of this terror group.
Paul Rusesabagina, who has always rejected the charges against him, has been sentenced to 25 years in prison. Since March, he has boycotted the hearings and denounced a political trial that he considers anything but fair. For his family, the verdict was decided by President Paul Kagame.
The judges decided what the dictator wants them to decide, so we expected exactly that. Now that the trial is over, we are happy that this play is over. It's a chapter that's over, and it allows us now to put more pressure in other places, to ask the international community, which now talks about sanctions, to actually invoke them on Rwanda. My father was illegally detained before this verdict. He is illegally detained today, and tomorrow, after this verdict, he will still be illegally detained. So our campaign continues. We are not discouraged by this verdict. It means nothing to us. It was not a fair trial, and no credible evidence was put forward.
Paul Rusesabagina, famous since a feature film that told how he saved more than 1,000 people during the 1994 genocide, is known to be an opponent of President Paul Kagame. Exiled in Belgium, he was arrested in 2020 when he got off a plane in Kigali. The opponent thought that the plane was to land in Burundi. Since then, the Rwandan government has always claimed that his arrest was legal. Tune, BBC News.
Well, let's get the very latest now. I'm joined by Prudon Nsengiyumva from the BBC Great Lakes Service. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. Just give us more detail on what happened today in court.
Well, Sophie, it was a very long and elaborate court verdict which lasted for about 5 hours. It was read by 3 different judges. And Paul Rusesabagina himself was not in the courtroom because, as Kalisa mentioned in her piece, he boycotted the trial, saying that he could not expect any justice from Rwandan courts. But the judges said actually something that was kind of like new. They said that they were very lenient to give him 25 years because the charges that he was facing were so serious that he could have been handed over a life sentence. But because he was cooperative during the preliminary hearing, so that's why they were a little bit lenient and gave him 25 years. They added that he could have even got an even lesser sentence if he hadn't boycotted the court.
It's very fascinating. I'm just wondering what the reactions have been so far.
The reaction has been mixed because his family says that they don't recognize this court as the legitimate court. They say that is, as they put it in their own words, a sham verdict. But of course in Rwanda people are happy, but also with a sense of surprise because I think it's fair to say that the majority of Rwandans were expecting a lengthy sentence. The terrorism charges are very serious in Rwandan laws, so they were expecting a life sentence, and even the prosecution had requested life sentence. In fact, they said that they are analyzing the verdict to see if they can appeal. But we spoke to some of the victims who were affected by the attacks that were launched on Rwandan soil. They said that they are happy that they think the verdict was a good one, and they are happy that the court has handed over justice.
Are there any grounds for appeal at all?
He can appeal. The family says that they will have to speak to Rusesabagina himself before deciding, and his lawyers, before deciding what to do. But they plan to do everything they can to make sure that he does not spend 25 years in jail.
And I know there have been quite some reactions, and some saying it's a political trial and a political verdict because of his status as an opposition activist.
Those are the allegations that the Rwandan government and President Kagame himself has denied, saying that the trial of Rusesabagina is fair and independent. He was accused of serious crimes that he committed and when he was in exile, and that he had to be answerable to those charges. Of course, the opposition, especially in exile, says that those are politically motivated crimes. It's not real. But I think it's important to also emphasize that Paul Rusesabagina himself pleaded guilty to some of the charges that he faced. For instance, he said that he sent money to the armed group, although he said he did not order anyone to launch any attack, but also he did not order anyone to kill people.
All right, Prudon Nsengiyumva, thank you very much indeed for at least bringing us up to speed on that very important development. Now, if you're watching us from the continent and planning to come over to the UK in October, your trip may be a bit more complicated and even more expensive than you first thought. That's because from October the 4th, there will be a change in the UK's travel policy, which means it will not recognize vaccination certificates from people who took the jab in Africa, South America, and a number of other countries, including UAE, India, Turkey, Russia, and Thailand. Now, this is despite travelers from these countries having similar jabs that are widely used in the UK. So what's going on? I'm joined now by the BBC Africa Health reporter Rhoda Odhiambo in Nairobi. A very, very complicated situation. Help us unpack this and understand what this actually means.
Well, Sophie, it's very complicated. When UK's Transport Minister Grant Shapps made the statement on Friday, he said that this was going to make it easier for international travel, but in real sense it isn't. So if we look at the two African countries that are no longer on the red list, that's Kenya and Egypt, one would think that coming off the red list makes it easier for you to be able to travel in the UK in this instance. But the good thing about being on the red list is that you have clarity of information of what it means to be on the red list, that if you're to travel to the UK, this is what you need to meet. But for countries like Egypt and Kenya, for citizens of these countries to be able to travel to the UK, some nationals have been fully vaccinated, but the fact that the UK is not going to recognize the certificates of these people is now making people start to question, then why is it that they were the same people who are the biggest donors of the vaccines that they have donated to COVAX, and most of which are donated in African countries?
Okay, that's where I want to come in, because where does this leave people who have been vaccinated using the same vaccines donated by the UK?
Well, Sophie, people are now in limbo, not because of not just people who had already been vaccinated, fully vaccinated in this instant, which would mean that they would be able to travel to the UK and also other countries that had imposed that if people want to travel to these places, they need to be fully vaccinated. But the fact that now the UK is saying that they're not going to recognize the vaccines that are being used on the continent is making people start to question, then why is it that people who are fully vaccinated, say for instance in Australia, in the US, can visit the UK and will not be able to quarantine, but someone coming from the continent, and in this instance Kenya and Egypt, from Wednesday, September the 22nd, and then going into now the following weeks, when they travel to the UK, they will be told to quarantine, of course not in a hotel, but they'll still be told to quarantine, which does not make sense because these are the same vaccines that are being used all over the world. These are the same vaccines that have gotten emergency approval from the World Health Organization. But the biggest question to this is the thing that many health bodies have been against is the rolling out of vaccine passports. And this is what we're seeing right now, the problem that vaccine passports is causing.
I'm curious, Rhoda, very quickly, whether there's been reaction across the continent or even from the Africa CDC itself.
So far, the WHO and the Africa Centers for Disease Control have not been able to comment on this, but we've seen various reactions from different experts who've come out strongly to say that the move by the UK government to put this statement out in the public is hurting the vaccination efforts that are currently undergoing within the continent. Of course, the continent is known to roll out mass vaccination programs for diseases such as polio, Ebola, but now when it comes to this saying that they're not recognizing the vaccines that are being used all over the world, it will now make it harder for people to be able to come out and accept the vaccines that are being used.
All right, Rhoda Odhiambo for us. Thank you. Thank you. Let's now take a quick look at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. 63 endangered African penguins have been killed by a swarm of bees in a rare occurrence near Cape Town, according to bird conservationists. One of the penguins was stung an astonishing 27 times. National Parks officials told the BBC this was the first known attack at the world-famous Boulders Beach, which attracts up to 60,000 visitors a year. A volcanic eruption on the Spanish island of La Palma in the Canaries has forced thousands of people to flee their homes. Officials from the island say a 6-meter-high wall of molten rock buried multiple homes, sparking wildfires in the surrounding forest. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez flew to La Palma on Sunday to oversee rescue efforts. Now, from one volcanic eruption to another, and almost 4 months after the eruption of the Nyiragongo volcano in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, thousands are still living in makeshift shelters after fleeing their homes. The volcano erupted some 10 kilometers from Goma and left 32 people dead and entire communities homeless. Caroline Lawyer reports.
Nwandi lost everything in the eruption. Since then, she's been living with her family in this makeshift shelter in the temporary camp of Kayembe.
I built this tent in which I live. We lack food. We suffer in this camp of displaced people. We are in danger of dying of hunger. We need the government to help us by giving us food.
Food shortages are causing a big strain on these people's lives. Water is also scarce, leaving them in unsanitary conditions. The eruption also destroyed their income.
When I can find a small job, I can earn $1. We need to be given food. The government must find a solution to get us out of this misery.
Last June, during a visit to Goma, the president of the country promised that everything would be done to help the victims of the disaster. More decent camps have been built, like this one in Kanyaruchinya. But strong winds and flash floods destroyed some of them.
The winds brought down many trees, which in turn destroyed the shelters. In total, we have 67 destroyed shelters out of the more than 1,000 on this site. The evacuees will have access to the site as soon as we have secured it.
Despite the optimistic approach, hundreds of families are yet to know how and when they'll be able to rebuild their life, and hope their plea for help will be heard by the government. Caroline Loyer, BBC News.
Still to come here in Focus on Africa, Mimi with the sport. In football, Kenya named a new coach for the Harambee Stars.
A good investment is like a journey. You need a solid companion who puts in as much effort as you do. Someone of great power. A companion who overcomes every difficulty to plunge into heavy seas with you. Shares experience to go full speed ahead and leads the way for new opportunities. Having years of experience in investment, Turkey has what it takes to be your companion. Let's sail together. Let's reach your goals together. Turkey, your resilient partner.
She's dominated European and global politics, but as Angela Merkel steps down after 16 years, what kind of Germany is she leaving behind? Is her country prepared for a future beyond the Merkel era? Our World, Merkel's Germany, on BBC World News.
Welcome back. You're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Now, several African presidents have arrived in New York for the UN General Assembly, which starts tomorrow. Already a large meeting focusing on climate change and the UN's Sustainable Development Goals has been convened on the sidelines by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Let's just remind ourselves of some of the 17 goals that the UN hopes to achieve by 2030. Firstly, it wants to end poverty in all its forms everywhere, a particularly tricky task after the fast rise in the absolute poverty in the world in 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. It also seeks to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all. And lastly, it wants nations to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Well, I'm now joined by Naveen Singh Khadka, our environment correspondent. And Naveen, several African leaders are already in New York. What should their message be?
So like you said just now, how the pandemic has disrupted whatever little progress they've had. Now, the question here is, the report that we had on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, is that all three aspects, all three dimensions, social, economic, and environmental, have been impacted. As a result, the progress has been severely disrupted. So the thing is now, the challenge is how do they go about it? And also the finding is that there's a severe lack of funding. So these African leaders, whether they will be able to secure the funding to address this disruption is the major challenge here.
You mentioned funding. I just wondered, do you get the sense that there is a real commitment and willingness really to attain the set goals, especially by, these more developed countries?
So you see, the thing is, of course, they were quite keen, but what we need to realize is post-pandemic, all the countries are so focused to rebuild their battered economy by the pandemic. Now, the thing is that the narrative here is we hear that, pundits, experts tell us that we could do that. It's called green recovery. We can rebuild our economies And at the same time, we can attain the goals of Sustainable Development Goals or even climate change. But the question is that possible or is that being done, particularly when several countries have started using whatever resources, whatever materials they have, and some of them might not be so helpful in terms of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, or even climate change for that matter.
All right. I'm sure you'll be keeping a very close eye on in the developments in the coming few days. Navin, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now, leaders at tomorrow's General Assembly will no doubt be looking at big picture solutions to the climate crisis, but small-scale actors will undoubtedly play a vital role. In Kenya, a group of young people are showing how planting and harvesting seaweed on the coast can be good for environmental sustainability and good for the wallet too. BBC What's News' Vic Chege went to meet them.
The coast is mostly known for its white sandy beaches that attract people to go on holiday. But beneath the surface of the water, there's another treasure, seaweed. Now, these weeds are a big part of income for the people in Shimoni. I went to meet them.
My name is Suleiman. I am 17 years old, and this is the area that we plant seaweed. We plant seaweed when the tide is low. Then we come home and wait for 45 days. After 45 days, the tide will have gone down. That's the time you go back to the ocean to harvest.
When we come back with the seaweed, we bring it here and dry it for 3 days. Then we remove the dirt. We sell the seaweed to an investor, and the rest we make shampoo, soap, body lotion, and fertilizer.
Could you take us through the process of what happens to the seaweed from the moment that it's harvested from the ocean to when it's brought here and even after it goes to the factory?
When we come back from the ocean, we dry the seaweed, then after that we take it to the store. We then grind it and we use some of it and mix it with the right chemicals to get the bar soap, shower gel and liquid soap. I have come here to help my parents.
When you harvest a lot of seaweed, you can sell it, and the money will help you to pay for your school fees.
My parents sell the seaweed so that they can pay my high school fees and buy for me school uniform.
The seaweed is important because it has raised the education standards of the young people. We didn't have many children, especially girls, going to high school, but now we do have both girls and boys. The young people also help their mothers with record keeping since they can read and write. There's great change in the youths. They do not loiter around anymore when they close school. If they're left idle, they can easily be involved in drugs.
With over 12,000 kinds of seaweed in the world, we've barely begun to scratch the surface of the potentials for their use. For instance, did you know that researchers are working on a variation that tastes like bacon when it's fried? Good news for all the vegetarians out there.
Well, you're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Time now for some sport with Mimi. It's just amazing how we see Kenyans shining everywhere.
Absolutely, Sophie, you're doing very well indeed. A Kenyan is the fastest man in Africa. That is not a line many would attribute to a sprinter from the country, which is famous for its middle and long distance running. But over the weekend, Ferdinand Omanyala showed the country is also talented in the 100 meters. Celestine Karane has more.
Ferdinand Omanyala ran 9.77 seconds to finish second in the Kipkeino Classic behind American Trayvon Bromell. His result is a new African record and propels him to 8th in the world 100-meter all-time list, led by Jamaica's Usain Bolt. Now, as the former rugby player turned sprinter celebrates the marked improvement in his personal best, a doping ban casts a shadow over his performance. In 2017, he was suspended for 14 months by Kenya's anti-doping agency after testing positive for a banned substance. Omanyala told the BBC that he acknowledges whenever he runs fast times, some will question his performance, but he says that the violation is in his past and it's time to forgive and move on as he focuses on his future, which for him means building on the milestones from this season. It has been a good season for Omanyala, who made his Olympic debut in Tokyo, reaching the semi-finals. And he hopes that his achievements will inspire more people to concentrate on sprinting, because many athletes don't often see the prospects of success in the shorter distances in Kenya.
Staying with Kenya to football, where Turkey's Engin Firat has been named as a new head coach of the Harambee Stars. He joins on a short-term basis, replacing Jacob Ghost Mule, who was parted ways by mutual consent just a few days ago. His departure came 11 days after Kenya drew their second straight 2022 World Cup qualifier. And winger Angelo David scored 2 tries in the opening 5 minutes to lead South Africa to a 38-5 win over Kenya and the Vancouver Sevens men's title. The pair of tries in the final were among 10 that David scored in 6 matches in the 2-day Sevens tournament. The tournament was missing many of its top-ranked teams at the curtailed Rugby Sevens World Series. And the 2021 Women's Afrobasket tipped off last Friday in Yaoundé, Cameroon, with 12 nations battling it out to be crowned champions of Africa. Earlier today, Mali defeated Ivory Coast 76-63 and Senegal with a 78-63 victory over Egypt. And just a few minutes ago, Cameroon, who played against Cape Verde, and that score, of course, went in favor of Cameroon, and Angola take on Nigeria a little later. That's all the sport for now. Sophie.
Thank you, Mimi. Thank you for that. And don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on social media. I'm at Ikenye. But that's Focus on Africa for now. Thanks for your company. Bye-bye.
This month, Los Angeles will finally witness the opening of the much-delayed but eagerly awaited Academy Museum. It boasts that it will be the largest U.S. institution devoted to exploring the art and science of movies and movie making.
The Academy Museum was originally intended to be
I'm Ros Atkins. This is Outside Source. The US is lifting its COVID-19 air travel ban on foreigners from November.
We'll be putting in place strict protocols to prevent the spread of COVID-19 from passengers flying internationally into the United States by requiring that adult foreign nationals traveling to the United States be fully vaccinated.
We'll have reaction from the UK and the EU, both of which have been lobbying for this ban to be lifted. It's been in place for 18 months. Also across the hour, we'll report from Russia. The students killed 6 people after opening fire at a university in Russia. Students jumped from the building to escape the gunman, who said he was consumed by hatred and wanted to harm others in posts on social media. 5,000 people have been evacuated because of this volcanic eruption in the Canary Islands, and officials are saying there are imminent explosions and imminent clouds of toxic gases because the lava is about to reach the sea. We'll speak to a volcanologist in Spain. And Canadians are voting in a snap election called by Justin Trudeau. It's a political gamble. The Prime Minister is neck and neck with his main rival.
Every Canadian has met a Justin Trudeau in their lives. Privileged, entitled, and always looking out for number one.
The United States has announced it will relax its travel ban for much of the world, including the UK, the EU and China, providing travellers come from those countries are fully vaccinated against COVID.